What if grief became the real spark for systematic change? Welcome to the Poisoning Podcast. I'm your host, Erin DeLulo. Today, I'm talking with Gregory Tatro, co-founder of Jenna's Promise, a groundbreaking women-centered recovery community born from the loss of his sister to addiction. From housing and employment to treatment and support, Gregory and his family are rewriting the script on how communities fight back against the opioid epidemic and addiction. This isn't just a story of loss. It's a story of hope, action, and the power of promise. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Gregory, thank you for joining us on the Poisoning Podcast.
So happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad former guest Jonathan Holtz introduced us. And it's been a few weeks, maybe a month in the making on getting you on the show. But I find that what you've done and your family has done just to be such a great story to share with others. And Jenna's story is personal and heartbreaking, I think. So I want to start with asking, what was the moment for you and your family when you said, we've got to do something around this tragedy of Jenna's loss and death?
Yeah. Well, I think it's an important question. And I think it's really important to kind of ground in that story of Jenna, for your listeners. I mean, Jenna was somebody, for all intents and purposes, she grew up in what you'd call a normal household, right? She had lots of friends. She loved to ride horses and swim. She was successful in school. By the accounts of her friends and her family, she really had the world in front of her. And it changed, as many of your listeners will be kind of familiar with, when she was prescribed prescription pain medication, and it just started her on this 6-year struggle of increasing addiction. And she cycled through. We were lucky, right? We had some resources, the family did, and so she cycled through treatment centers all across the country. She joined groups, and yet slid ever under that spell of substance use disorder. She wanted so badly to get better, and she also never stopped trying. There are stories of when people themselves were trying to get into recovery, even though she was struggling, she often would reach out to them and encourage them on their path. There was one moment where she was in a better place, and she sent something to her mom then, in this moment of determination and vision and a call to action. She knew what she was going to do, and she made a promise. She said, "Mom, when I get out of here, me and you are going to help people." That was going to be her life mission. She wanted to help those that were struggling. And unfortunately, my little sister was 26 years old when she died of an overdose soon after. And to see someone try so hard to realize that dream of helping others like her, and to see that light go out, it's a devastating blow for a family and for the people that knew her. But we also thought of her promise. We remembered all of those things. And, though she was gone, her life and her journey kind of nudged us, the family, at first. And we decided to kind of take the leap. And the first thing that we did is we were really open about why she died in her obituary. And we talked about that nudge that we kind of felt for Jenna as well, where we said that her journey was something like a rock that was thrown into a lake, and the rock disappears, but the ripples continue ever outward. And that was kind of a moment for us. And what we saw is it made waves across the state, and people began to come to us. Someone would say, "My brother is struggling," or "My daughter is struggling," or "My friend," or "My neighbor." And that moment really confirmed to us that the crisis was much bigger than Jenna or a family or even a town. It was woven into the lives of so many people who had been kind of living in this forced silence and solitude, and the community came together. And that's kind of was the beginning of us looking at what would become Jenna's Promise. Her funeral reception was held in this building that I'm sitting in now. It was an old Catholic church that we were raised Catholic. And so Jenna and I were altar servers here. They closed the church down and it was an abandoned building in town. And then for the funeral reception, the church allowed us to open up its doors to host the session or the reception. as my parents walked out, they saw that the asking price of the building almost matched Jenna's life insurance money. And so they ended up purchasing the building with that life insurance money. And that's why we call it Jenna's house. As my parents like to say, she truly did pay for it. It really is her house. And so we built a community center. We wanted to have this beacon of light for people to come to in our town to kind of help break down the stigma of recovery and to get the word out about recovery too. And we opened up our doors almost exactly 5 years ago now. And hundreds of people showed up. And that was the beginning of what would become Jenna's Promise.
5 years. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're having a big celebration on August 2nd, the day before Jenna's birthday, to bring everybody in and have some community events and yeah, just celebrate the good too.
So if you're in Vermont, folks, I'm
Right.
sure Gregory would welcome you.
Absolutely we would. Yes.
And Vermont's lovely in
It
August.
is. Yes. It's not, you don't die of the heat like you do in some states in August, you just melt a little bit, right?
Yeah, just melt a little. I like that. So, one of the things that I have found out doing this podcast and Substack newsletter is when you start talking about addiction issues, about what is going on in our society, how many people just open up and then want to talk to you. I've met so many people who are saying, "Oh, I lost my cousin," or this, family friend, or my daughter's college friend
Hmm.
died from addiction. And I've never, ever, ever heard these stories in my life. So
Yeah.
I love how you did it in the obituary, didn't hide it, which I
Right.
think there's because of the shame around addiction. I'm sure it's not many obituaries.
Yeah.
So bravo.
Well, I think it's what Jenna would have wanted, right?
Hmm.
Because she never stopped trying to help people. And I think it's important when you talk about, there's so many people. This story of Jenna's Promise, it began with a family. But what's really beautiful is that there were people who came to us who want to join our mission. We have a staff of over 20 now, people who drive an hour every day to come and be part of Jenna's Promise and all the special ways that we've kind of tried to build this model. And I think that there's beauty in that because if it's just this family, then these ideas that we think are helping to kind of push back on this broken
Hmm.
system, you can't truly replicate that. You only replicate it by grassroots movement and excitement. And we're seeing some of that.
Wonderful. I mean, you're empowering folks. And I think so many families can feel powerless watching a loved one struggle
Yeah.
with addiction, and your parents were in that category. What advice do you have for families who feel sort of stuck in that cycle because addiction is so hard to beat?
Yeah. Yeah, I would certainly suggest for people to reach out. Many communities have like family groups
Hmm.
for people who are struggling with substance use disorder. I would say that people could also certainly connect with, for example, Jenna's Promise.
Hmm.
And there are many recovery organizations across the states, across our towns. And I mean, like you said, sadly, it's not hard to find somebody just by kind of asking around in your town. And oftentimes, when you're open about it, people will come to you, like we saw as well. Um, it's a hard journey, and what we learned is that there are things that you can control, but there's so many things that you can't. And you can't force somebody into recovery, but you can be there for them and support them and love them and you know um, the line between heartbreak and hope can be a very thin one on this journey for many families. And we all have to try to walk it as best as we can.
Yeah. Oh, uh, words of wisdom right there, Gregory. Words of wisdom. So, in reading some of the articles on Jenna's Promise, and I watched her presentation at Recovery Reimagined.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it was great. You've spoken about sort of the gaps, or may I say failures, in our national substance abuse model.
Yeah.
What are the biggest flaws you've seen firsthand, and how is Jenna's Promise addressing them differently?
It's a great question. I think one thing I really want to emphasize is that the system is broken, and that doesn't mean that the people who are doing the work of recovery and helping
Sure.
people themselves aren't, and they're incredible. It's just that, collectively the resources that are being kind of harnessed are, the magnitude of the problem is so much. Jonathan had mentioned in your last interview with him that he and the governor like to say it's the equivalent of a 747 jet going down every single day. And we
Hmm.
all know that if that were actually happening in our country, we would shut down all flights, right?
Yeah. Oh, no
And
doubt. No
for
doubt.
sure. And with this, we just kind of shrugged because we view it as those people. And so,
Yeah.
one of the things that we really focus on that Recovery Reinvented did, and that's partially why we've connected so strongly with the Bergams, with Jonathan Holth, and so many of those people over there who do this great work, is stigma is huge. Stigma is like a wall that divides like what is from what could be. And
Oh,
I think a lot of what we are trying to do at Jenna's Promise and partner with other organizations like the work that Jonathan has done is talking about it as part of the cure for this.
hmm.
Unlike most other, obstacles, diseases or whatnot that we have to kind of work on, the mere act of talking about this and bringing it to the light is actually part of how one day this is going to be solved. Because right now, as we've seen, we've been able to basically try to bring people in talking about it, and then you can light this candle in their heart, right? And then they can go forth and maybe treat somebody differently, or maybe they can connect with somebody a little bit differently, and that could be the difference between somebody getting help or not, or feeling defeated or not. And so stigma reduction is really big with this. The other thing that we really work on doing is we're trying to connect our community. We call ourselves a village model. It's because we
Okay.
really kind of bring in the community as much as possible to help be part of this solution. And so as a result, we're never trying to be those people up there on that hill. Instead, we've been called the new heart of Johnson. And that's something that's really
Mm.
critical to us as well, because ultimately, if we're not able to bring in the people who might be ignorant or who might not be caring about it, then we're just talking in a smaller and smaller circle. And so we've worked really hard to bring abandoned buildings across our town back to life. So we have an old church that's turned into a community center. We have a cafe that was abandoned that we brought back to life that actually hires people specifically in recovery. And we have a surplus goods store that was in an old lumber yard, and an appliance store, and we roast coffee. And we have recovery housing. So instead of this town kind of slowly decaying over time, which it had been, now there's new life and people are stopping in town. And we've been called the recovery capital of Vermont. And I think that's part of why we haven't run into the NIMBYism that so many recovery programs kind of run into, because we're giving something to this town, but the town is giving us something back too. And I think, Johann Hari has his famous quote: the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection.
Mm.
The
Yeah.
fuel in this model is that connection with our small towns and helping with that rural rejuvenation too. On top of all that, we have what we call our phase roadway, where we bring people in and try to address, I think, the failures of the overall model. As you know,
Okay.
people go into treatment, they're there for 30 days. In Vermont, it's 14 days. And then
That's,
we send, it's crazy.
that is should be illegal.
Yeah,
That is just, that's moral failing right there.
yeah,
14 days of treatment
for
is
sure.
all you can get.
And it shows how the incentives are wrong. Basically, if
Yes.
we are lump summing patients, right? You get paid the
Mm-hmm.
same amount if you're a treatment facility, which we have amazing people doing the work. We have Serenity House, Valley Vista, but they're lump summed. So you keep them for 14 days, or you can get an extension to 21, but it's the same amount of money that you're given. what behavior are we incentivizing for these people who the bottom line matters and are struggling, right? And so um, you're right. It's this example of a broken system. Another example is that after they leave after 14 days, or in many states 30, many of them are sent back to their homes, to the streets they used to live on, to their friends they used to use with, to the same economic issues. And we act collectively shocked when, some studies show that there's a 70, 80 with opioid use disorder as high as 90% return to use rate within a year, much of it in the first few weeks when they're the most fragile. So our model is really kind of designed to bring people in and kind of embrace them as much as we can. And I think that's how we try to kind of fundamentally shift the paradigm of recovery, at least in our state. Um, our village model is the result of seeing this with Jenna and many others. And so basically, if people are falling through the cracks in those early days, we're doing the opposite. We're really wrapping them up. We're acting as a cast. This team I get to work with, we're giving them space in that cast. We're giving them time and support to heal, which if they don't, just like anybody with an injury, right? We throw them back out, you're not going to actually get better, right? And so we really kind of have four pillars in our program. We have a program-based residential, which really kind of focuses on a lot of behavioral and life skill things. And then we have a clinical program that is a trauma-informed DBT based program. We have
Could
a health.
you tell
Yeah,
us what DBT is? I always like to explain acronyms for our
absolutely.
listeners.
It's an important point. You're right. And so, yeah, basically, I'll just broadly
Yeah.
explain clinical. So we have weekly check-ins and psychological supports, but the keystone is this, yes, dialectical behavioral therapy. So DBT
Wow.
is the one of the successor schools to CBT, which many people have heard of as cognitive behavioral therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of broken depending on who you talk to. There's acceptance and compassion therapy, ACT, as well as DBT. DBT is a little bit more well known. It's been shown to be pretty helpful with substance use disorder. I think ACT is kind of an underdog, but deserves more credit with this too. But basically, this intensive outpatient program, or IOP, is taking residents into this IOP every day for 12 or so weeks, and it takes up the first half of the day for these early
Wow.
phase residences. And honestly, like, the impact of the IOP has been a game changer. And I think it makes sense. My passion project is politics, and my wife and I are trying to meet every single living president. Doesn't matter their
Oh,
party, doesn't
yeah.
matter their politics. It's just
Yeah.
we're total history nerds. We want to visit every presidential home. We got a
Oh.
chance to meet George W. Bush at his Christmas party last year, and he's been really passionate, as you know, after his presidency with
Mm-hmm.
helping veterans, which I think is great. But he refuses to call the post-traumatic stress disorder. He says it's a natural reaction to trauma.
Hmm.
And I was like, what a great way to kind of put that. And
Yeah.
then I was kind of thinking after we had that conversation, and I was like, tell me substance use disorder is any different. We have
Right.
17 beds here in Jenna's Promise. The vast majority of our residents who come in have an extensive history with sexual and domestic violence and trauma. And that's often what drives people into use. I think we all know many people who, after a stressful week, they're like, oh my God, it's Friday. I need a drink. And that is a culturally natural, accepted thing for someone to say after
Mm-hmm.
just normal workplace stress. But if
Right.
you're carrying that trauma with you, knowing that you could kind of turn to this and numb that pain,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's shocking. And if we're only working on I'm sober and not that underlying issue with this DBT based program, then I think we're not doing them service in the long run.
Totally. Wow. No, I love the George W. Bush quote. I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
So, how many presidents do you have left to meet?
Just Barack Obama. Yeah.
But weren't you an Obama fellow?
I was. Yeah. I get to jump on a Zoom with him.
Hey, President Obama, what you doing there, bud?
Yeah. I'm waiting. I mean, I'm hoping one day I'll be like, hey, Mr. President, can we come hang out? And I'm waiting for him to say, yes, we can, but
Yeah.
it's not there yet. So
Not there yet. Maybe this interview will help.
fingers are crossed.
Okay. So back to serious matters. Um, what policy changes do you see needing to happen? And what have you been successful at changing in Vermont? I guess we need to change these 14 days of being covered by insurance
Yeah,
for treatment.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, obviously, it's not a shock to anybody that us saying that we need more resources for recovery is critical. I
Mm-hmm.
think what people kind of forget is that it does look like it costs money on paper, but when
Okay.
you add up the costs of somebody cycling through a treatment center over and
Yeah.
over again, which can cost tens of thousands of dollars, if you're looking at oftentimes people who are overdosing or who are deeply struggling, getting picked up by the ambulance, getting involved with the police, going to the
Mm-hmm.
ER, that adds up a lot. Think about people who could be working at a job, right? Who aren't able to do that, or spending time with their families,
Yeah.
right? Or God forbid, like what happened with my sister, we lose them, and that whole trajectory, that whole path that would have been burned, into the sky doesn't get to happen anymore, right? And
Yeah.
all the lives that she could have affected and helped is just disappears like clouds into the night sky. And so I think there's huge costs of that. But setting even all of that aside, in our prison system in Vermont, we
Mm-hmm.
bring in people from the prison system all the time. Um, to have a young woman incarcerated in Vermont costs them almost $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And as they will tell you, they're often just sitting and not quote accomplishing anything unquote, and they want to be doing something. Jenna's Promise is able to take people often on early release and bring them in here, and it costs about $35,000. So it's a net savings, not even including the stuff that I mentioned earlier, and they're working on building themselves back better, and I think that's also critical too. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing is understanding our terms a little bit better too. So Jenna's Promise currently, right
Mm-hmm.
now, is designated as a recovery residence only.
Okay.
And that's only a piece of what even the residential team does. We have a workforce program, we have a health and wellness program, we have, like I said, this clinical program. We have three different social enterprises between the appliance store, a surplus goods store, and a coffee roastery that we run. We have a community center, and
Mm-hmm.
yet we're only being measured on how many beds we have filled and how often residents leave and how often they stay. And so what happens is the state comes back to us and they're like, why are you more expensive than recovery resident XYZ? Which they do incredible work, but that's not what we do. It's only part of
Mm-hmm.
what we do. And so I think we're hoping to be able to have this designation of a recovery village so that one day someone can take what we're doing and then as a result replicate it, and if this is helping people and we're beating the odds that we talked about earlier with this, our success rate for long-term recovery is almost a mirror of that 80%, 70% that people have without any supports, then there should be more of this. And it's cost effective, like I said, too, but we don't have the infrastructure to do that. Additionally, I think really helping people as they're leaving prison with basically some sort of ramping out back into society, specifically around IDs.
Mm-hmm.
What's amazing about our workforce program, and I'll hopefully we can kind
Yeah.
of dive into that a little bit down the road here, but our workforce development program manager works to get people IDs for a job. They don't have IDs. How can they get a job when they're already overwhelmed, biologically, neurologically unstable in those early days?
So you're saying, and are these the people who are on early release or just a vast mix of folks who come and stay
Almost
with you?
all of our residents who come in are lacking at least one form of ID. Yes.
Because they don't have like the birth certificate, the social security number, because
The
when you're
license, the non-driver's ID, the passport, any of these things. So
right,
how
you can't do anything.
you
Like, I
can,
mean, there's very little you can
yeah,
do. Even to like go open a PO box,
yeah,
right? At the or I've had a UPS store box. for a business I run,
Yep.
I had to have two forms of ID to show
Right. Yeah. So how is
for
it that you,
mail, to get just to get mail.
yeah, it's true. I mean, you want to go buy cough syrup for God's sake, right? So I think,
Oh,
the reality of this is that again, we're sending people out from treatment, from prison, from wherever without any of these supports. And then like we shame them when they don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. They don't know their next steps.
right.
And so what Jenna's Promise does is we bring them in and so we help them with the trauma. So we're not just focused again on I'm not getting high anymore, see I'm cured, but focusing on why did this happen in the first place. We look at our residential system, we're giving them a safe place to live,
Mm-hmm.
carved out away from the stressors that they have, but also focusing on actually we've trained all of our staff in behavioral intervention skills that often are in schools with kids that are struggling because people are biologically, neurologically unstable. They just went through the worst time in their life, right? Health and wellness, we try to build them up with healthy skills. And then in workforce, it's the same thing too, where we're trying to help get them on the path for a career. In workforce, many of these people have no resume. They have gaps in their resume, which is a red flag to anybody in HR.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but they have no idea how to even begin to build a resume, do an interview. And so our workforce development program manager comes in and she does all of that. And then not only that, but our social enterprises help with basically getting them on their feet and acting as a classroom laboratory for them to get those skills back. They earn a certificate of recommendation from JP's Promising Goods. And then after that, our local businesses that have stigma around substance use disorder, instead, what's happening is they're feeling comfortable hiring our folks
Right.
as a result.
Wow. And
But they can't get started with any of that without an ID, right?
oh
So,
my gosh, the basics.
yeah.
No, not to deviate, but I was listening to the radio while going to pick up my son from soccer camp. And in Nebraska, you can't get SNAP benefits if you have been found guilty of drug trafficking. No, they
Mm,
didn't say how long, what's what's the intensity of drug trafficking, right?
right.
Is it all of drug traffic? And by the way, all of drug trafficking is bad to me. I don't think drug trafficking is good for society.
Sure.
But is it someone who's using and sharing with a friend, or is it really someone like who's part of a cartel and
Right.
moving millions of pills? But they interview a gentleman who served his time,
Mm,
and so he was guilty, can't get SNAP benefits, and how hard it was for him to find work. And so this whole idea of, again, like the stigma, he served his time. If he is
right.
now trying to be a productive member of society, is having a hard time finding work and can bear have a how do you pay for food?
Right.
We really need to think about this. Again, you know, if someone's going away for life, I'm not really concerned about it. But we should as a society really think about when you serve your time, does that mean you're guilty for the rest of your life?
Right.
And I think that's how we view people with addiction issues. Well, they were an addict, so they're untrustable. We can't hire them. They're untrustable.
Yeah.
That's our these are just really big issues our society really needs to put more thought into instead of maybe making a reactionary decision.
And, at heart, like I went to school, I learned about behaviorism. So oftentimes I look at how policies, like what are we reinforcing, right? What is more likely to happen for that person? They're probably, if they're not able to get SNAP benefits, they're not able, if they're lacking an ID, again, here
Hmm.
too, not able to get a job, what's going to happen to them? This isn't a happy ending for them. The chances of them returning to use and returning to that life
Right.
goes up. If our goal is for people to get better, to return to society and be
Right.
a rehabilitated individual, whatever terms we want to use, like then give them a shot, you know?
Exactly. Give people a shot. Um, so we sort of talked about your wraparound services, which includes helping people get IDs, workforce training. Anything else you'd like to mention
Yeah, I think
about that?
I think just talking a little bit about like the residential program that we have,
Yeah.
we're pretty excited about our earliest pillar that we kind of put together out of these four was a residential, and it's the most intensive initiative that we have at Jenna's Promise because we're kind of with the residents from the morning to the night, essentially. But we've, like I said, adapted this system to kind of emphasize behavioral health, and staff really are trained in that behavioral health. And I think the difference when we implemented that into our program has been profound. Our return to use rates have gone down, our staff turnover has gone down, as well as people leaving the program has gone down. And I think a lot of it was that we really looked at it as like, okay, you're in recovery, so just don't be using, like I said in the beginning. And it's so much more than that. People have to relearn skills. Imagine if, any of us were gone for a few years, say we got stranded somewhere on an island, right?
Yeah.
Like your skill set of like, how do we even, I don't know, jump on a Zoom meeting, right? Is going to kind
Right.
of atrophy if you're not using that at all. And so our job is to kind of help build that out. Case managers are meeting weekly with them for check-ins and kind of guiding them along this phased roadway we talked about. Doctor's appointments, managing medications, helping to kind of create daily calendars for them, even arranging transportation. And then we have a
Yeah.
peer support team too that's been essential, giving this hands-on support. And it's been this really unique, really heartful part of the program where there's that deep connection. The last pillar we have is our health and wellness pillar. And I kind of love what we're doing here because in medicine, in psychology, there's this critique of what's called the disease model, right? There's something wrong with you. So let's make the thing that's wrong with you less wrong. I have a cold. I'm going to the doctor to get better. I have depression. I have substance use. Let's focus on, fixing that so you can be back to normal. But for me, I'm influenced by Martin Seligman's positive psychology theory of like, that's great. We should work on the disease rot on the leaves, but what about the soil? What about the
Right.
sun? What about, adequate water and nutrition and nutrients for this plant to grow strong? Don't just focus on what's wrong, but focus on building up the good as well. And so our health and wellness program is all about just that. And it's kind of offers some of our most paradigm shifting work because how can someone focus on recovery if they don't feel well, right? Good
Right.
nutrition, sufficient sleep, physical activity, that's critical, right? And I
Totally.
think we talked about this instability of 14 days. They're still in many ways detoxing when they come to
Yeah.
us. And so if we're not supporting them in that way and helping to build them up, I think that we're doing a disservice. I think of like substance use disorder, the actual addiction is like this plant that has deep roots in the mind, and treatment has ripped out those roots. But we've just upturned a lot of soil of what is growing in there. Health and wellness is really kind of trying to guide what comes after nutrition and gym familiarity and
Mhm.
exposure to these different schools of thought with yoga and meditation and healthy boundaries. And so we actually ended up launching a health and wellness IOP that comes after the clinical IOP as a result. We call it the integrated wellness continuum. And they're meeting the residents in the early phases are meeting every single day, focusing on their health and wellness. Last week it was sleep health, and so they were talking about having good sleep hygiene because sleep is so
Mm-hmm.
critical when you're healing. This week I think they're working on a little bit of strength, essentially, which is some gym familiarity, and so we're kind of trying to help replace the old unhealthy habits that were learned during use with skills that kind of support more of this lasting wellness.
That's so great and so needed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive what you've created in almost, we'll say 5 years, right? 5 years,
Yeah.
even though it's in a few weeks. Uh, I have seen, well, let me start. I have a background in fundraising. So I understand. I don't do as much of it these days, but I understand what it takes to be successful in it. And I've seen, so many people who've started a nonprofit after losing a family member, and rightly so, wanting to talk about education and making awareness in recovery and, you know, distributing naloxone, which I have three
Mhm.
different types behind me. So, but then I don't think they understand what it takes
Yeah.
to really, I mean, yes, they have experienced an awful tragedy, but it takes a lot of aggressiveness and persistence to get the funding to make these organizations successful. So you have done that in your first 5 years. Can you share what some of your hurdles were, what you've learned, what has worked? So maybe a few other organizations could learn from you?
I wish I could be more helpful in this department, but
Oh, uh-oh.
I mean, honestly, for us, we just told our story and also we connected. I talked about that earlier, passion
Yeah.
to try to meet the presidents. Well, it's a skill set that, I was kind of able to then turn to meeting with our local legislators. And the reality is that many of these elected officials are desperate for something that could help alleviate this crisis. And so
Yeah.
we were able to kind of get some state funding that began as a pilot program, but then
Okay.
has really kind of expanded into the Department of Corrections and other parts of the state government, and they're trying to help support this. We rely on fundraising as well, and donations, and it's something that we really want to grow further into, because as you know, with government, this stuff can be cut at any point in time, and so we feel like we've been able to really kind of prove our worth, but also we understand that this is vulnerable, and in the long run,
Mhm.
we want to replicate, we kind of have to have that going forward too. I think as we continue to show that on net where cost savings, it's easier to justify that. But for other organizations just getting started, and talking to a lot of our partners and talking to, some of the people in this world too, like it's a very, very tough time. And I wish I had a roadmap through it myself.
No, it's a challenging time. Yesterday it was reported that nationally they were going to cut the SAMHSA funding, and then on the same day that the president signs the Halt Fentanyl Act, that is
Mm.
reported then today. Brian Mann, who's the addiction reporter for NPR that most of our listeners are aware of, he was told that oh no, they're not going to get rid of those funding. They're just going to release it incrementally now, but
Mm.
that's hard to plan.
Right.
So yeah, I do encourage everyone to try to broaden their fundraising because you never know when things change.
Right. I think that's critical. And I think specifically in the world of substance use disorder, I think, you know, it's amazing to me that we see people dying at the rates that they are.
Yeah.
And it remains an asterisk in our national conversation. And so I think so much of this that we all have to be kind of doing here is to be helping to raise awareness. So you're doing this, right, with your
Yeah.
podcast, which is so critical. But, for us, we need to change the conversation from talking about druggies or those people to
Mm.
realizing that they're the same as us, right? And so there's this quote from Chris Christie that I love it. He mentioned it in regards to politics, but I think it fits even better with substance use. He says it's hard to hate up close. And I think what's beautiful about the work of Jenna's Promise is that the residents are out in the community getting jobs and interacting, and it's helping to break down that stigma and raise awareness. And I think ultimately, what I see as a need and seeing how this community has shifted over time is we all have to be doing that. We all have to be bringing this up and connecting as best as we can. And it's so hard to do because we're short staffed, we've cut to the bone, we're overwhelmed, we're burnt out. But I think if we are going to solve this, we have to change that asterisk into a bold bullet point, along with the other big issues that are happening today. I understand why people are concerned with immigration and abortion and climate change and taxes, and it doesn't matter what side of the aisle, but this is an important issue too. And how do we get it there is, I think, part of what we need to start asking ourselves and our elected leaders to start talking about more openly.
Yes, I think we've seen as a country a focus on supply,
Hmm.
the supply part of addiction, and that is fine. but we have to address the demand side just as
Yeah.
equally, and we
Yeah.
are not there yet.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because it's veiled and obscured by this stigma. And I think
Hmm.
when we stare, when we look directly at it, I think stigma is a brittle thing, right? Like conversation helps to make that mask kind of crumble into our hands and strip it of its power too. And so I think for me, that's part of how we reduce that demand because we create that connection that Johann Hari starts when we start to tear off the masks that is so critical. And so I don't know. I think there's a lot of hope that I see too in regards to this. I
Hmm.
think just when people become aware of it and they start talking about it and thinking of it, they start to see them as real people, and that's because they again are us, right?
Yes.
But it's hard work.
It is very hard work. Now, Vermont is a rural state, like my
Mhm.
state of West Virginia. How do you see the challenges different in a rural community? And what solutions have you found that you think could scale nationally?
Mm. It's a great question. I think because this is a rural community, one of the biggest, most obvious things we run into is transportation, right?
Ah, yeah.
Really difficult to get people to different places because we don't have easy transportation. We
Mhm.
rely on a service that's funded by the state called Rural Community Transport, RCT. We can call them; they're able to get them to, meetings or to some meetings, to different doctor's appointments, as well as to get their methadone as well. Um, I think what's also difficult is that our communities have really been hollowed out on the rural areas. Many people have moved to the cities. You know, the industrial beating heart of many of our towns across the country have really stopped beating in a lot of ways too. And there's this intense struggle of what happens when, the thing that added that vibrancy kind of goes away. And for us, I think we've really focused on this rural rejuvenation as a keystone of helping people in recovery, because I think like with our social enterprises, we can cycle profits back into our program. But the other thing is that rural areas being hollowed out, Jenna's Promise has across our town reinvigorated six different abandoned buildings and brought something needed to the town. And so we've
Mhm.
really seen that as being a really vibrant, important thing. We have a cafe on Main Street, like I said, a surplus goods store, appliance store, community center. People are stopping in town. And, that means that we're not just in the business of addiction recovery anymore. We're in the business, or not the literal business, you know what I'm saying? But like
Yeah.
the work isn't just about addiction recovery, it's about recovery for our
Yeah.
struggling communities too. And I think instead of fear, when our neighbors in our rural towns get something out of it and they're feeling that they're being stitched back together, then they're part of the larger mission. So it becomes this feedback loop that's been one of the most incredible accidental things that we've kind of stumbled upon. But I think it's part of how it gets resolved. And so I think the rurality of this is actually what makes it work so well here. And also, I think it could be adapted to any struggling community, whether it's rural, suburban, urban, or, you know, on that island somewhere too.
On the island. So, looking ahead, what's your biggest hope for Jenna's Promise and for families still in the fight?
Yeah, I think for Jenna's Promise, I think the biggest hope is for us to go out of business, right?
Ah, yes, I love that answer.
I mean, the goal has to be for us to, the promise has been kept, right? And then that there's no need for people to enter into our program because the crisis has abated, or the supports to help people wrap around them as they try to leave prison, as they leave treatment, as they seek help. Um, you know, there's no real need for it anymore, and there's no real pull for it anymore too. So I think that's the ultimate dream. In the medium term, I think finding ways for us to replicate ourselves is really critical. And I think for substance use disorder, raising awareness is so critical and important too.
Thank you. So, I have a question. Do you, and I ask this question of almost every guest, do you carry naloxone on you?
I do, and we have it in all of our buildings as well. And we're actually lining up another naloxone training here, I think, hopefully
Wonderful.
next month. But I think it's critical, and it's pretty easy to use, and it could save a life. Now, with xylazine and some of these other
Yeah.
drugs, it's making it more difficult, but it doesn't make it less worthy of something that people should be aware of. There's also just a lot of toxic rumor mongering around this too, and I think you know I've worked in the construction world before coming to Jenna's Promise, and people thought that we were giving people drugs, basically,
Right. Yeah.
and we try to tell them this actually reverses the overdose. This actually reverses what's happening. It doesn't get them high. And, breaking down that stigma has been really critical too. And we've made vast strides in our state, especially in construction. A partner organization run by someone named Reed Wabi has really kind of shaped and reshaped the construction world, and people are actually saving lives and overdoses out on construction
Mm.
sites across Vermont. So naloxone is critical and important.
That's wonderful to hear. Congratulations on that work.
Yeah, well, I mean, credit to Reed, but one cool thing
Yeah.
that Dennis promised did is we opened up one of the first Narcan vending machines in the country. There's been a couple of others, but
Yeah.
and we were the first in the state, and they actually this over at our local health center that basically you punch in a couple of numbers and you can grab naloxone. It's right out on the street, and people come and get it and utilize it all the time, which is wonderful. So
Yeah. That's, I wish every community had one.
yeah.
Well, Gregory, where can people follow you and find out more information about Jenna's Promise?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of different social and our social media handles, but our Facebook is our biggest one, which if you just kind of look up Jenna's
Yeah.
Promise there. We also have JP's Promising Goods, which is our surplus goods store, as well as Jenna's Promise Roasting Co. And we'd love people to come visit, follow, check us out, buy our coffee. And then we're also on Instagram and Twitter as well.
Great. Well, Gregory, thank you for joining The Poisoning. I enjoyed having you on.
Yes, thank you so much too. I really appreciate it, and it was such a pleasure to talk with you.